Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video we're going to learn about Axios and how to use it. This video is going to be purely just hands-on developing programming, so let's get started. I'm going to first open a browser and I'm going to navigate and search for Axios. And the first result is the GitHub page for Axios. So what is Axios exactly? Axios is another way how can we create HTTP requests in JavaScript. And it's a third-party library, which means it doesn't build into JavaScript. Unlike XML HTTPrequest, which is built into every browser, this Axios, we need to import this. So you can read about Axios in this page. You can also see how to install this. And you can also see examples, how to use it. And there's a really nice documentation about Axios. And we'll soon use this. Before that, just want to create a new HTML file, just like always. Let's create a new HTML file, index. And we'll create also JavaScript file. We're going to build a really nice small weather app just to show you how to use Axios. And I will also import my JavaScript file. There we go. Now that I have my HTML and JavaScript files are set up, now let's go back to Axios and see how can we import Axios into JavaScript. And you have the installing section here. There are a few ways to install Axios. The only way that we'll use at this moment is using the script tag. So please, when you do this, don't use those commands. We're just going to use either one of these CDNs. And just to show you what is this Axios, if you will copy this link and you will paste it here, you can actually see the actual code of Axios. It's a bit messy, and the reason why it's so hard to read is because they optimized it. They made it smaller. So every variable here is one letter, like S here, and maybe, there's E and I, and everything is very obfuscated. This is important for optimization, just to save traffic, so the file its size will be smaller. There are also no spaces here, no nothing. But this is the actual code, and you can also read the real code in GitHub as well. But for now, we'll just import Axios. And Axios is JavaScript library. And sometimes we use libraries in JavaScript or in any other programming languages because other people already wrote a lot of code that we can use. For example, Axios is making HTTP requests very easily. And this is written and maintained, so they solve and fix bugs. And they also maintain the code, and we can only get benefit if we'll use it. It will save us a lot of time. And you're going to use a lot of third-party libraries. This is totally fine. And Axios is one of those. So to bring Axios into our small website, we just need to copy one of these links, and we need to paste it here. One important note, when you paste the Axios, because we're going to use the Axios here in script.js, it's important that we will import it here, so the script tag will be first before our script tag, before our JavaScript file. And this way, if it was the other way around, Axios was not imported yet, and we would have some errors. So now when we have the Axios here, we can use it. And to use it, we can go back to the documentation and check out the usage example. And we can now clearly see the easiest way to use Axios, like this. Performing a GET request, exactly what we need. One small note, ignore this right now, at the moment, so we don't need require Axios, because we already imported the script tag, so we just need to copy this without the require. So keep this in mind when you use Axios. Now, if you go back to the JavaScript, you can paste the code just like this. And you can already see the structure of Axios. So we'll be using the Open Weather Map API. And for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a very nice free API that provides current weather information. You do need to sign up for this to get an API token to use this API, but it's free, so you can just do this. I already have an account, so I'm just logging into the API. And you need to get your API token. Your API token can be found when you click on your account profile and then you go to API keys. I'll copy this for now because we're going to use this for the GET request. And now I'm going to back to the documentation just to get a reminder how to use the API. So there we go. We want to see weather for a city by name, and this is the exact link I want. I'm going to copy this. Let's save it into const URL equals, and don't forget the HTTP. This is very important, otherwise the browser will not recognize this. So again, there are two parameters in the Open Weather Map API in this endpoint. The first one is the city name. Let's choose Amsterdam. And the second one is the API key, which I already have. So I'll put it here. Now that we have the URL, we can check out and see how does the Axios works. So you don't need to import anything in JavaScript. As soon as we have this Axios, we can automatically use the special variable called Axios. It will be defined for us. So I can do something like axios.get, then we can just input the URL. I will change the URL, for example, into this long Open Weather Map URL. And then let's investigate how it works. There are three sections here. The first section is when you call .then. And the second one is .catch. And the third one, that's actually not really true. I will call it finally. So there are three sections. And all of these sections, it might be a little bit confusing, but they are still on the same method. So you can write it something like that. You can write it in the same line. So the then and the catch is on the result of the then, and the final is on the result of the catch. I'll just make a spaces just to make it clear for the three parts. We get the then, we get the callback in the then when we have a success. If there was an error, the catch will be called. The function inside of the catch will be called. And if either error or success, the finally will always be executed. So let's try to let's just try to run it like this, because I see that if there's a success, it will just log the response. If there is error, it will log the error. And maybe I'll just add to finally console log all done. Let's try to run it. Let's see what happens. I will open the console. And there we go. So we can see that we already have the Axios returns us a request. And this is not only the data, you can also see here the status code, which is 200, the status text, okay. You can also get the headers from here. And you can also get, of course, the data itself, which is exactly the weather information that we expect to get from this API. And now let's go back and try to have an error. So if there is an error, it will come here. It will call catch instead of then. Let's simulate an error by maybe changing a good way to simulate error. I can just remove my API key, and because I don't have an API key in the URL, then Open Service Map will not give me the information. It will just give me an error. Let's try to do this. And there we go. First of all, I got 401 unauthorized because I'm not allowed to use this API without an API key. And then this is the console log for the error that we got. and the error is printed request failed with status code 401, which is great, exactly what I expected. And the all done is still, we're still seeing all done because this happens either way if it was success or failure. This then catch and finally is something called promise, and we'll be covering promises in a future video. And this is a really sneak peek how to use this. And let me try, now that we have the response and we want to show maybe the temperature information for now. Let me bring back my token, and I want to run it again to see the data itself. Now that we have the data, the response, I want to get the temperature. I have to find it. How do I find it? I need to investigate this response, and the console is a great way to do this. I can check that, okay, so I got this response and I need to get the data. And inside of data, I might check the main. And inside of the main, I have the temp itself. The temp itself is not in Celsius, so we need to convert it using the API. You can read it in the documentation, but I have already read, so I know that you just need to add like this: units equal metric. So it just will be easier to read for us. Once again, I refresh the page, go into data, main, and yes, as we can see the temperature in Celsius. So to recap, to get this, we need to go to data, main, and then temperature. So maybe let's try to do this here. If instead of response, I can do response.data, I will get the whole big object of the data. Then, if I'll go to main, I'll get the information about the temperature. And if I'll call temp, I will get the current temperature. Again, I'm recapping. So this is the path. This is the response. This big object is the response. To get the data, I see that there's a data property here. So I'm doing response.data.main.temp. So you can see that I'm like propagating into the object. This is why it's very useful to print the response and just check out how can I get the data. If I wanted something else, I can just click and see how can I get from the root up until what I want. So let's refresh, and I see that I'm printing just the temperature, which is great. So now we're going to do a small exercise. This video is going to have a lot of exercises, or it's going to be very interactive because we're going to build something nice together. So the exercise for this time, the exercise will be the following. 1. Create HTML and JavaScript files. 2. Import Axios to your HTML. 3. You need to basically use Axios to get the current information, just like I did. And 4, I want you to, what I did here, maybe I will put it down. The exercise is here. If you notice, I console logged the current temperature. For you, I want you to display on the HTML page the current temperature. All right. So this is what I want you to do. Don't forget about the errors, and I will keep this split screen so you can see all the same code, and you can see the code and the exercise. So you can now pause the video and do the exercise yourself, and I'll be back and will show you the solution in a few seconds. All right. So I hope you did the exercise. Let me show you the solution. I already did here in my example steps 1 to 3. So the only thing that's left is to display the temperature in the HTML page. For this, I will just create a new element here. Can create maybe, I'll just create an H1 because I want something big on the screen. I'll give it an ID. Maybe I will call it message, and it will be empty for in the beginning. And now, to print the current temperature, I'll go to the then function, and what I will do, I will just get the document message, and I can change the inner text, for example. You can also create elements. You can. This is for you. There are many ways to do this. You don't have to do this in the same way I did. And let's do this. It is now. So I'm using string interpolation to get the current temperature, to print the current temperature. I can also do this fancy Celsius sign. And that's it. So this is what we had to do. We just need to, instead of printing, we're showing it on the screen. Let's refresh and try out. Great. So every time I refresh the page, I get the current temperature in Amsterdam. This is great. Now I want to show you the difference between Axios and Xmlhttprequest. I have here a file of Xmlhttprequest, and I want to show you the difference between those two files. So this is on the right, you can see XHR, and on the left you can see our code. Note the difference. Note how easy it is to use Axios. It's very elegant. You don't even need this. This is an optional. You don't need to do this. This is just the success, and this is the error, and that's it. You don't need to parse any other status codes or doing open and send. This is much easier and more elegant way to do this. And another note on Axios, if you noticed on Xmlhttprequest, we had to handle errors in two ways. The first way is the network way, when something goes wrong with the network, and then we used on error. And the second way is to check the status code if it was not an error. Axios works in a little bit different. Axios combines those two errors together into one error here. So you'll always get here if either you didn't have internet, or the website was unreachable, or the HTTP just returned you an error. So the Axios doing the heavy lifting for you. It already does this checking for you. And this is why it's very useful to use third-party libraries, because someone already wrote the logic for you, and this will keep you more busy with actually building your application instead of doing this parsing of HTTP status codes. I will close the Xmlhttprequest example because we're focusing on Axios here. Okay. Next, I want to do a little bit change and refactoring here. I want to create a new function. I'll call it getWeather, and this function will have one parameter, city name. As you can tell, this will get the current weather for a given city. I will copy all of this code here, and I will paste it here. So now I need to do a few changes. The first change is in the URL. Now in the URL I have Amsterdam hard-coded, and I need it to be different every time. So I'll use again string interpolation, very good tool, and I will replace Amsterdam with city name. Next, we're still going to have the get and the catch, and we're still going to show the current weather into the HTML page. One last thing is that I need to maybe, no, that's fine. That's actually fine. Let's try this out. When I refresh the page, there's nothing here, but that's fine because I have defined a getWeather function. So I can maybe try get weather for Amsterdam. And there we go. As you can see, it displays the weather. It also does an HTTP request call, so you can always go to the network tab and see what's going on. And this is great because now we have a dynamic function, then you can give it a city and it will show you on the screen the weather. It's a great start. So let's try New York. Surprisingly, the same weather. So maybe our function doesn't work. Let's try something else, maybe something far away. And Moscow should be colder. Yes, it is colder. That's great. And maybe let's try another, just last one, Barcelona. I hope I wrote it right. 17 degrees. That makes sense. So we have this generic function that you give it a city name and it displays on the screen the city. I think this is really cool. And it's very cool that we could do this only in 16 lines of code, including some error handling. Next, we're going to have another exercise. You are going to help me. You're going to help me with enhancing this app. So the exercise number 2 is going to be a little bit difficult. It might take you a little bit while to do this. So the first thing that I want you to do in the exercise is mimic my work. So you need to have the same get weather function. You can just copy from my code, from the video, just make it exactly the same. You don't have to, no, that's actually fine. You can have it the same. You don't have to copy exactly the same message. This is fine. The second one, I want you to have create a text field, text input, and a button in your HTML page. Give them an ID because we need them. 3, we need to attach event, attach on-click event on the button, and let it call get weather with what kind of city? With the same city that was inputted into the text field. And call it get weather with the city in the input text. I hope that's clear. And 4, on error, show a red error on the screen instead of console log. So I want to see a big error on the screen instead of console log. You can use the same label to present an error and to present a message. And the last one is extra. You don't have to do this. This is a bit extra. Show loading message when the request is not done yet. So some kind of loading indicator while the request there. This is an extra points for the students who are motivated and completed steps 1 through 4 easily. You don't have to do this. Okay, I'll put this here below once again. I'll close this XHR. And once again, pause the video, do the exercise. It's a little bit difficult one. Try to focus, take your time, no hurry. And once you're ready, you can resume the video. So you can pause now. All right, I hope that wasn't too difficult. So let me show you the solution for this exercise. Number 1 is already done because we have this function here. Number 2, let's create a text input and a button. Let's create it here. Input. I'll give it an ID. city text input. And I will create a button. The ID will be send maybe button or get weather. No, send. Go. Let's check the HTML. Fine enough. I'll make it a little bit bigger so it will be easier for you to see. Test. Awesome. Okay, done. Number 3, attach on-click event on the button and let it call weather, get weather with the city inside of an input text. Whew, that's the tough task of this exercise. So let's do this step by step. First step, we need to attach on-click event. So we need to, first of all, we need to have a window onload event. And here we will attach the event. So how do you attach event? You probably learned in the previous model. You can get element by ID, and you can use your ID. I already forgot what kind of ID is. Send button. Send button. And on click. You can also add event listener. That's fine. So what happens here? When we click the send button, we need to do 2 things. The first thing is we need to get the city name from the text field. The second thing is we need to call get weather function. Let's do this step by step. The first thing is let's get the city name. City name. How do we get the city name? Well, the city name is inside the text field, the input text field. So I'll just do document.getElementById, just like before. And this is the ID for the text input. And if you recall, how do we get the actual text from the text input? Is we use the property value. Now that we have the city name, let's call the getWeather function. We're calling getWeather function with the city name, and we're done. Before I do step 4, I really want to see that this code works, and I also encourage you to run the code as many times as you want. Do little incremental steps instead of writing everything in one time and then testing and getting tons of errors. This is much easier to catch an errors like this. So let's try to input maybe Berlin. Let's click on go, and I do see a response. How can I know if this is the correct city? I can go to the network tab, and I can surely investigate the URL and see that we are querying Berlin. It's over here. So surely you can see it's Berlin, and that's great. So I can now try maybe to select another city. So I can select London, and I'll get the weather for London. Amazing. Lisbon. Maybe let's try to see what happens if we just input the wrong city. Oh, look at this. What happened? We got an error. Not found. I think that's appropriate HTTP error for incorrect city. But we're still printing the error into console. Let's try to put it inside of this label so the user will not have to open the console all the time to see the errors. Let's go back to the Visual Studio Code. So how do we handle errors in Axios? That's easy because we have the catch function right here. And instead of logging the error, you can just show the error on the message. I will copy this because we can use the already message that we defined here. We can just set it into error. And let's see what happens. Let's try to simulate the error right now. I'm inputting incorrect city, and there we go. we have successfully printed the error. We can do something a little bit fancy. We can do something like if error. Actually, it's more important to see what can we get from the error. I'm console logging back the error just to see what kind of properties we have here. Okay, so all I have is this text, which is fine. Let's keep it like this. The only thing that is left is to make it red because it's an error. And one way to do this is we can change the style of the element. For this, I will extract the message element into a different constant. And this is just to avoid calling getDocumentById twice, because now I can replace this with this. And the second part is just to go to style and color and just set it into red. Let's try it out. Let's input the correct city. Great. Let's input incorrect city. And this is red. I think that's great for now. But we have a small bug. If I go back to this label and I chose Amsterdam again, I see the weather, but it's in the wrong color. So let's fix that. To fix that, we need to go back to where we displayed the weather, and we need to reset the message back, the style back to black. I will do this very similarly to the same technique that we did here. I'll first copy this line of code because we can get the element here. And then I will set the text. And lastly, now I will copy and change the style. Instead of red, it will be black. And that's it. Let's check it out. I'll refresh the page. I don't even need the console now because I want to really see how the app functions. Let's try New York. Okay, this looks good. Let's try wrong city. All right. We got a status code, request failed. Let's try maybe Berlin. And it's black again. And this is great, and I'm really happy with the result. I will also do the extra right now. The extra is quite interesting because we do want to show some loading in between. And how can we do this is quite simple. All we need to do is copy this logic and show loading. But where are we showing the loading? Because we need to know, we're now working with asynchronous programming. We need to understand where the request has started but not yet received. Let's go back to the code and see what happens step by step when you click on the button. And for this, I will use the powerful JavaScript debugger, which I hope you're already familiar with. I'm going to the debugger, and I'll put a breakpoint just exactly here. This is the first function that is being called when I click on the button. Let me just type here something and click go. So now we can go step by step to see what happens. First of all, we're getting the city name. That's easy enough, and that's Berlin. That's great. Now we're calling getWeather, and this is where it becomes interesting. I'm using the step next because I want to go inside the function. Step next. The first line in the function is to define of the URL. That is fine. The second one is Axios.get method. So this is a method called get on Axios. And once I click on next, look what happens. Before that, I'll add a breakpoint here and here. So what happens now when I go step, it will go here. It will exit the function. And why is that? It's because Axios.get is asynchronous, and when you call an asynchronous function, it will just call it, and it will continue executing your code until the result is known, and the code will just continue here and here. And only when I continue, let the code run, then the result will finally come back. And when I click on continue, surely enough, after a while, we get to the then callback. And now we just render the screen and finish the job. So where do we put the loading? It doesn't make sense to put the loading inside then, because when we already have the data, we need to hide the loading. It doesn't make sense to put the catch. So where we'll put it, we can put it just before we're calling Axios. Show loading. I will do this in a very similar way. And now, because I already see some code duplications, I might even take this constant, put it here, and now I don't need to redefine it a few times. How do we show the loading? We're doing a very similar way. We're also using inner HTML. I can use the same loading message. And I want to change maybe the color to something like, I don't know, let's change it to gray. So now, when we click on the button, it will first show loading on the label, and then after a while, it will change to either black or red depending on the result of the Axios get call. Let's check this out. We are still having the breakpoints here, so let's remove those. 1, 2. All right. Let's put Paris. And click on go. Oh, did you see that? Probably not. That was very, very fast, because luckily I'm here on Wi-Fi and it's very fast and the data arrives very quickly. But we have a really cool tool in the network tab. I go back to the network tab. There's this online thing, and you can simulate slow networks with this tool. So what would happen if I'll be on a slow 3G? Let's test this out. I'll refresh the page. Now I'm on slow 3G. You can also see this exclamation point that it shows you the network throttling is enabled. Don't be like me. Don't forget to close it after you finish. There's one time I complained that the internet was slow, and it was because I just forgot to change it from a 3G to nothing, and then I just surfed the web with this slow internet. So let's try this out. Now, when I click go, we can see the loading. There you go, 2 seconds, and now we can see the weather. Let's check Paris. Loading, and there you go. Amazing. We can now try to simulate maybe a real error. Let me turn off my Wi-Fi, and I really hope that this will not break anything. I'm going to turn off my Wi-Fi. Now I don't have any Wi-Fi, so the network calls will not be able to even do anything. So let's try to call Berlin. Go. There we go. We got a network error, which is different from the 404 that we got before. Okay, I'm happy with the result, and I want to recap what we learned in this module, in this video. And in this video we learned about Axios. We learned how to use it, which is very simple. How to use Axios: you use Axios.get, and then there are two special methods. There are then and catch. And when there's an error, it will go to the catch callback, and when the data has arrived successfully, it will go to the then callback. It's a very nice and easy tool to use, and this also uses promises, which has their own advantages, which we'll learn in the future. Right, I hope you enjoyed this video, And I hope you learned about Axios. And thank you for watching. And have a great day.